Every day you encounter things that you can't see, right? You always encounter things that you can't see. Maybe you feel them, but you don't see them. Maybe you're aware of them, but you can't perceive them with the naked eye. If you think about it, with every breath we encounter and are being encountered with a spirit that we don't see. That there's so much more to that which we call life. Even quantum science, the physicists on the cutting edge who have the most incredible instruments that could measure the universe to date, have said everything that we can see and touch and measure accounts for about 5%. The rest of it they call dark energy, dark matter, that there's 95% of what we can't see. And that's just what we think, really, based on what we can see. But what science and mysticism, what a spiritual seeker and finder will tell you, is there's so much more that meets the eye. And so today, I want to get practical, and let's talk about this in a way that hopefully does begin to unveil what we often call the invisible realm. When I lived in Hawaii, the teachers of Hawaii were real believers that the greatest prayer you could pray is, let that which is hidden be revealed. Let that I can't see or know in this moment, let it be revealed, one step at a time, one awareness point at a time, to let it be revealed. How many of you would agree that today our world needs us to show up in better ways? Amen. To show up as all of what we are, as all of who we are, as spirit, mind, body beings, and to show up with a reverence for all of life, for the earth, for creation, for all creation, to show up realizing that the essence of you is the essence of me, the essence of a tree, of a star, that we are all part of one fabric of life. And I think most of us would agree with that, at least to some degree in theory, but then when it gets down to practice, it almost is like, it blows your mind. And so what do you do about it every day? Well, I want to welcome you. Just look around today. Just take a minute and look around. I want to welcome you to the sanctuary of angels. They're here. I want to welcome you into a sanctuary that is filled with both body, mind, and spirit. It's right here. I want to welcome you into a sanctuary right here that is a constant flow of that which we can see and that which we cannot see. Your very heartbeat is evidence of that. And so I'm curious, have any of you ever encountered an angel? Have any of you ever had a voice just come out and just like literally almost save you? I saw some hands go up. I know of at least 3 of you that told me. One of you said you were washing dishes on a Saturday and literally heard a voice that said, go to Unity tomorrow. There's others that literally heard a voice and you're like, okie dokie then. It doesn't matter that I hadn't been to church in how many, 20, 30 years, I'll go. How many of you have heard something or experienced something? How many of you have encountered a microscope? You remember your first encounter? I remember being in school and the teacher bringing out that microscope on the desk and putting something under the slide and inviting us up one by one to look into it. And he was telling us that these things were part of our body, that they were amoeba and bacteria. And I was like, oh, gross, get that thing off of me. But at the same time, I was fascinated. It led me to that was the beginnings of my becoming a nerd. I wanted a chemistry set, and I wanted to peer into this world that had just been opened up to me. I'm like, how are these things part of me? How do these things exist? And I can't even see it. I didn't know it. And sometimes we forget that because it is so commonplace. The telescope, the Hubble space scope, all of these things now give us insight into a such bigger reality that we're already a part of, and yet we tend to forget it so often. And the question becomes, what do we miss out on when we forget that? Sometime back, I've shared this once before, but sometime back I had a hair appointment. It's amazing what happens in the chair of a stylist. Amen. What comes out, what gets healed, what gets revealed. Having other than the roots, what gets really, we get to the spiritual roots of things. But I sat down and Michelle said, I don't remember what we were talking about. She said, wow, there was a woman in earlier today that was telling me she had always wanted to experience dolphins. She wanted to be in the water, touch dolphins, swim with dolphins. That had been a lifetime dream. And someone recently invited her to Florida because someone else couldn't go, and so she got to go to Florida. And she was telling me that she was in the water, she was with those dolphins, she experienced something that had been on her bucket list. And she said the most amazing thing happened. That when she was there with the other people, she said one particular dolphin paid more attention to her than anybody, and it made her so happy. She said that dolphin almost wouldn't leave her, and it just kept bumping into, like her lower belly, just kept bumping into her, and she loved it. When she got ready to leave, the dolphin trainer went over to her and said, I'm glad you enjoyed it. And she said, I take this for what it's worth, but I know dolphins very well, and I know that dolphin extremely well, and that almost never happens. If that does happen, it typically means the dolphin is trying to tell you something needs attention. She said, I don't know if you've got anything going on, don't worry about it, but just next time you go to the doctor, just ask. She said chills ran all over her. So she made an appointment, went to see her gynecologist, asked for an exam, and as it turned out, she had the beginning stages of a rare kind of ovarian or uterine cancer that's almost never detected early. It basically has no symptoms, and once it begins to, it's advanced so far you can't cure it. And the doctor said, it's remarkable that you've discovered this, but we can completely eradicate it, and they did. And it was so powerful, and Michelle said to me, she said, I just am blown away that a dolphin is that intelligent. I said, yeah, but you know what, Michelle? I marvel in the fact that we live in that intelligence. I marvel in the fact that we are that connected, that we actually live in a connection, and our ancestors knew that was not unusual. They knew how to commune with all of life. They knew how to commune with what we would call an animate rock. They knew how to commune with the waters and the sun and the sky. They had a reverence. Back when the tsunami happened in Sri Lanka, over 150 people were killed. What the media consistently reported that they marveled about is many people reported that just a short time before the tsunami, animals of every kind headed uphill. They even saw bats come out in daylight to leave their place and to go move somewhere else. And they found very few carcasses of animals. Again, there is an intelligence, there is a way to be in communion, I believe, that will lead us into a more holistic way of being, a more holistic way of living with each other and with the whole. And I truly believe that that's what's being called forth now, that we really have a choice. Do I want to walk about my day and conduct my life as if this is all that matters? As if the material realm is really what's real? As if what's possible for me is only possible because I can see it, touch it, taste it, smell it, point to it, and call it a fact? Or will I use all of this as just what it is? It's good information, and it's a part of the picture. Will I be one, as the Peruvians call a chakaruna, who walks in two worlds? You see, Jesus, the Buddha, the enlightened teachers, they walked in two worlds. They were very much, Jesus said it, I'm in the world, and you're in the world, but you're not of the world. You are of the great scheme of life. You're part of the fabric of life. If you look at the scriptures, every Christmas rolls around and we dig into the Christmas story in a mystical, metaphysical kind of way. But there's something that's very evident if you start looking at just the Christmas story. The angel appeared to Mary. The angel appeared to Joseph. The angel appeared to the shepherds. The angels ministered to Jesus. Do you know the angels show up over 300 times in the Bible? And yet, sometimes we feel like, well, I don't want to talk about angels. They may think I'm woo-woo. I'm asking us to keep it grounded. But what are we possibly missing out on if we forget that there are angels among us? If we forget that someone that may longer be on this earth plane can get a message to you if they need to? That we sometimes forget that there's so much support for us. There's so much more that is possible when we begin to really open up and realize that it's very natural that heaven and earth, David White, the author, said, the visible and the invisible are working together to reveal the miraculous. That the visible and the invisible are always working together. I think some of the consequences unconsciously, if we forget and just get so tuned in to this plane only, again, I'm not at all saying we dismiss it. I'm not at all saying we ignore it. But I'm saying the only way this is ever going to get better is by bringing a higher intelligence to it, a greater quality of heart to it, greater abilities and a level to commit, of being able to show up and do the work that is ours to do from a place that is inspired and inspirited and honors the essence of you, that would harm none in the process of trying to create justice for all. Amen? It's such a powerful thing that we need today. I think some of the consequences of failing to put some work into realizing this connection and the level of support we have is, number one, we're out of harmony, individually and holistically and collectively. We overly depend on physical things for our well-being. We limit our potential. We limit the potential in others. We limit our collective potential. We also miss out on true fulfillment, because if we are a cosmic spirit being, then our purpose is far more than, as the Bee Gees said, staying alive, staying alive. There's a whole nother level of consciousness there. I don't know what I'm channeling today, but hopefully it'll settle down. Hopefully it'll settle down soon. We get stuck with limited capabilities and coping mechanisms. There's an overemphasis on the material world and a disregard for the sacredness of earth and the resources and how we could tune into higher ways of generating the resources and the fuels and the things that we need in cooperating with one another and cooperating with the greater reality rather than taking advantage of it so much. We tend to feel stuck in survival mode, and you may feel exhausted because trying to operate on just simply a physical level is absolutely exhausting. Failing to fill your spiritual cup, failing to have your heart really receive love of a higher quality will leave you lacking and wanting. And so we tend to miss out on these things. And so the question is today, what are some of the things that we can do to make this practical? What are some of the things we can do to begin to tune in to, number one, our greater reality of being, and to tune in to the greater reality in which we live and have our being, and to be cooperating and having the support of what I would call heaven and earth. So let's quickly look at 4 things out of many, many, many things. But number one is open. To realize you're an open system. You're an open system because right now your mind is being informed by a higher intelligence. Your heart is being kept in rhythm and animated and beating through a source that extends beyond you. Your breath that is happening through your body, what's going on right now with the miracle of the cells inside of you, you are nothing short of a miracle sitting there with all of that that's happening. And by the way, we think we're sitting here, but we actually know we're part of a round earth that is flying through space at this very moment. It doesn't make logical, you can't wrap your mind around that. You just have to go so far as to say, wow, I'm part of something so big. And so if I ever think I have it figured out, help me remain humble. Humble. You know, I am the center of the universe. You are the center of the universe in some ways, but more importantly, we are centered in a universe that is always seeking to open us, to grow us. The co-founders of the Unity movement are a couple called Charles and Myrtle Fillmore back in the late 1800s. Myrtle was in the end stages of her life with tuberculosis and didn't want to die. She had 3 sons. She felt like she had a life ahead of her. And she discovered a new idea about who she was that led to a physical healing, an emotional, mental, spiritual healing on all levels. She literally was healed when she was in her 40s and lived to be in her late 80s. Her husband, Charles, witnessed this. Many people around her witnessed this. He wanted to know what happened that created this physical healing in her life. What happened that was changing this woman who was often gloom and not as happy in her lookout? What happened that had made her the light of the world and know that she was intimately connected to what she called God, but that God was very different than she had previously understood. And so Charles, her husband, began to study all different texts. He read the Bible, he read the Bhagavad Gita, he read everything he could get his hands on in the late 1800s, and he finally said, in all of this babble, I am going directly to headquarters. He got so confused, he just said, if there is something that I'm a part of, then surely if I sit for an hour every day with the intention of opening my heart and my mind to commune with this presence, if there's something there, it has to work. And so he did just that. He was very dedicated. He sat for an hour every day in what we would call in the silence. And what began to happen to him, at first was not immediate, but over time, his dreams became very vivid. He was a man struggling to have enough money to care for the family, and his wife working what through as she was working through. He was struggling in real estate. And in his dreams, he began to he'd see a piece of property and it had a sign that said sold. And then lo and behold, the next day or two, he'd actually come across that piece of land and it didn't have a sold sign on it. And he thought, maybe I should buy that. Maybe that's a good business investment. He began to receive very clear guidance, and that set him on a journey for his own healing. He continued to study, but he truly became one that was a mystic that believed that for each and every one of us, our goal was to keep our heart and our mind open. That whatever we were doing, to realize that the greatest thing you can do is to realize, I'm going to live my highest truth, but I do not know it all. So to keep our hearts and our minds open. The second thing that I believe the angels, the heaven and earth are working with us in ways that we can cooperate. Number one is to keep your mind, your heart, your entire being open. Number two is to be mindful and to continually close the gap that would separate you from your God, the gap that would separate you from the essence of another, the gap that could separate you from your spiritual well-being, any gap that could separate you in any way. And I can tell you, after hearing story after story and story, that the unseen realm supports you in doing that, in closing that gap, and bringing you into wholeness and healing. Right before COVID, we had a young man, his name is Arthur, started attending our church. And then COVID happened, so we had to close. But he stayed in contact with me. And he opened up and We had several counseling sessions where he shared his story. He had grown up in a very challenging environment. There was only really one adult in his life that took an interest in him, and that was his aunt. His aunt was a Christian missionary. He just adored her. She adored him. He at times got to do some little trips with her, and he, as a young boy, wanted to be a missionary. He wanted to be a Christian like her because he saw something in her that mattered. As he got older and he couldn't travel with her, he began to attend a church, and he wanted to step forward and volunteer and do things. And in that particular place where he stepped forward, he said he witnessed such hypocrisy, such abuse, such that it sickened him. He could not bear it, and so he felt like, well, God just can't be any part of this, and so he completely left. He found another one, and he tried it. For whatever reason, he had a similar experience there. And so in his case, what Arthur told me, he said, I pretty much threw out the baby with the bathwater. I said, I don't believe in any of it. I don't want this God stuff. These people are hypocrites. I don't want anything with it. But Arthur always had a heart that was very loving and wanted to connect. There was something in him that yearned for that. He just didn't have any kind of frame of reference that supported it. And he said, Reverend Darlene, you may not believe this, but he said, one day I went and I was having like some Reiki work done and some energy work done. I said, yes, I'm very familiar with that. And he said, and while I was sitting there, they told me to keep my eyes closed, and I did. And he said, all of a sudden, I saw an Asian-looking woman come in with a red flowy dress. And she came over to me and she said, Arthur, you are loved. Arthur, your heart is being healed. You are loved. He said, I didn't open my eyes, but when I finished, I asked the person, I said, who was that woman that came in? And the person said, what woman that came in? Nobody came in, it's just been the two of us. And he said, I didn't open my eyes, but I could see it. And he began to describe this Asian-looking woman with a red flowy robe, and she told me this. And the practitioner said, I believe you're describing Kuan Yin. The practitioner got their phone and said, let me see, and pulled up a picture and turned it around. He said, that's the exact, that came in while I was on the table. And so what happened over a period of time, he was met by the presence of Kuan Yin, by a spirit that would lead him into healing, and eventually over the years lead him right back into a church where he could be a part of it. He could realize that Jesus is far more than what many people reduce him to, that God is far more than what many people reduce it to, that love and God and Spirit can find you through any path. And today, he has since moved, but he left some of his artwork, just a beautiful artist and a beautiful man that was able to reconcile and heal. But do you hear what I'm saying? That came to him. And had he just shut it off, not told anybody, I imagine that Spirit would have kept knocking on the door, but you don't know exactly. And so paying attention to those things, hearing those stories, and realizing and knowing there is something in this universe that wants to heal you. It wants your heart to be open, and it wants to close that gap. Also back around that same time, I was guided to begin studying Mary Magdalene. I'd never been interested, never wanted to study. But I was guided to some of the Gnostic Gospels, the Gospels that have been found in more recent years, and I came across this book, The Gospel of the Beloved Companion. It spoke to me so deeply, I wrote to Jean de Quillian, the woman who translated this from its original text. And much to my surprise, she's normally in France, she happened to be in Vermont and responded. Not only did she respond, some of you participated because I said, will you do an online teaching? And so she did. She did a 7-week series that a bunch of us were online with her every week for 7 weeks. During the time I was working with her, I had the privilege of talking to her a number of times. And I started having dreams, and very vivid things were happening, which is not unusual for me. But she happened to ask me about something, and so I shared it with her. And I also shared, I said, sometimes I just have what I would call automatic writing or inspired writing. It just comes through, you're channeling. And she had me read something. And then she looked at me and she said, I find it interesting that you speak of it as if it came from somewhere other than a part of you. This is what she said. She said, you speak of it as if it comes from somewhere outside of you, something that is not you. You speak of it as if it makes it more special, or perhaps the occurrence itself is rare or special. What if you just understood it as inspired writing, coming from a place of which you are a part and is a part of you, but it transcends the rational mind? What would shift in you if you understood it as an aspect of being, that it is being inspired? The root of the word inspire, of inspiration, is being in spirit. What if you understood it as it's just you being in spirit, and it's flowing from another dimension of being, which is perhaps another dimension of your being? She taught me something very precious that day. Because even though I've done so much work and I tend to think that I don't think of things as separate, I was in that sense. I was saying, this is coming from a place, it's not me, it's just coming from some other place. And when she said, it's not channeled, it's not automatic, it's inspired. And what would shift in you if you just come to know yourself as an inspired being, and those things could happen anytime, whenever they needed to happen? And so I ask you that. What would happen if you just really said, you claimed it? I am an inspired being. Would you say that with me? I am an inspired being. I'm an inspired being. Would you show us that first PowerPoint, Acela? I am an inspired being. I mean, just look at that. The Northern Lights. How could you stand there and not say, I am an inspired being and an inspired universe that is filled with so much more than I can imagine? So to open your heart and mind, to realize, to do what we need to do to close the gap, and then to realize that Spirit is working on our behalf to close the gap, to close that gap. The third is to live in partnership, to really begin to understand and realize that you live in a partnership, the world of seen and unseen, and to acknowledge that. When you begin to do this, I promise you, you will not go around and just be stomping arbitrarily on ants and bugs. You'll get to a point you realize, if this has to go, I got to have a little ceremony to explain to it why this is about to take place. You really begin to feel your connection with life. It changes how you show up. But when you begin to recognize that you truly are living in partnership, inspiration, things begin to naturally happen that will guide you, that will move you further along. The fourth one then is to know. Well, part of that, living in partnership, is asking. Ask. Let me see what I need to see. Guide me in ways that I can understand. Help me connect with the people, with the resources, with whatever it is I need to connect to. There's a scripture that comes from Hebrews chapter 13. It says, be not forgetful to entertain strangers, for thereby some of you have entertained angels without knowing it. So open me. Help me to close the gap. Number 3, I want to live in partnership. And so I'm asking, I'm giving thanks. A while ago when I made a statement, I looked up and the clock said 11:11. Some of you know that's like an angel wink. Anytime you see those kind of things, I just say thank you. More times than I'd like to admit, I've been in my car and looked down for just a second, and as soon as I look up, if I didn't stop right then, I would have hit somebody in the rear, and the first thing I say is, thank you, angels. Thank you. How did that happen at that very moment? When we begin to say, thank you, angels, we begin to say thank you and acknowledge these things, it begins to be more present in your life. The fourth one then is to know that you are being supported, guided in the fulfillment of your potential and your purpose. That there is unseen support, there is soul support, there is what we could call heaven team support. Heaven and earth are supporting you in the fulfillment of your soul's potential and your soul's purpose. I'm going to invite Sarah and Mary Kay to come on up. I want to share with you a closing story by a friend, Kelly Hunt. She's actually been here to provide some music. She's an award-winning music artist based out of Kansas City. And I got to know her when I was in Lawrence, Kansas, and one day I was having lunch with her and she shared this story with me. And so I reached out this week and I said, Kelly, I remember your story. Can I share it this week? But I don't remember the details. Within 30 minutes, it just so happened, she was home recuperating from COVID. She's usually on the road. She was home and she was able to send me this story within 30 minutes of when I asked for it. It's like, wow. So it wanted to be shared. So here we go. Kelly writes, I was driving across an intersection with a green light. I had the right-of-way when a woman coming from the opposite direction T-boned me on the driver's side without slowing down during the turn. In the second or two before I was hit, I could see it was going to happen, and I thought about my son, and I said, Adrian, out loud. In that last split second, I then heard a voice that said, relax all the muscles in your body now. And she said, that's the last thing I remembered, and I just closed my eyes and relaxed. I went limp. I was thrown forward against the windshield, then blacked out for a few seconds. Waking up, realizing what had happened, and I was still somehow alive. The driver's side door was pushed in so far I was almost in the middle of the front seat. When I tried to get out, my seatbelt was jammed, and so I had to figure out how to get out from under it and slide on my back and try to push open the passenger side door with my legs. For some reason, I couldn't hear anything, but I knew I had to get out before the car caught fire. I finally managed to get the car door open, but could only sit, and I was almost faint. I couldn't feel my body. I could see people in the distance running to me. I couldn't hear them. But all of a sudden, a man was right there. And I could see very clearly he had on a name tag like an attendant working at a gas station. It just said Tom. Tom said, put your head down between your legs so you won't faint. He said, is there anyone I can call? And somehow in that moment, I rattled off my husband's phone number. He said, keep your head down. I put my head down. Things unfolded quickly. Police arrived. My husband arrived. But before I left in the ambulance, I stopped everyone because I wanted to thank Tom. They looked at me mystified. I just said no. I described him in person. I described him exactly how I saw him. And they said, ma'am, we're the ones that were here. There was no one else at the scene like that. I was the only one who had seen or heard him. When I was being treated by my doctor, the doctor was amazed and said, had I not relaxed at the very moment I did, I would have probably broken my neck. And had I not put my head between my legs, I would have most definitely passed out onto the scorching hot sidewalk that day. She said, the other interesting thing is the same voice of the man named Tom appeared to be the same voice that I heard while I was in the car that said, relax all the muscles of your body now. She said, to this day, I'm thankful to Tom because if no one else saw him, he certainly saved my life. You know, it's up to us what we believe. But I believe there is so much more that is calling us back into the kind of intelligence that built pyramids, back into the kind of harmonious intelligence that has done things that to this day we still can't figure out how in the world did they do that way back then. Well, because, my friends, it's because there was a communion between heaven and earth, spirit and matter, working together as one. So we're going to sing this song, and I just invite you to open in a way that's comfortable for you. Sing along with us, if you will. This song says, "Calling the Angels." Calling the angels, calling the angels, calling the angels, calling the angels. At my right hand, Michael, at my left hand, Gabriel, before me, Uriel, behind me, Raphael. At my right hand, Michael, at my left hand, Gabriel, before me, Uriel, behind me, Raphael, calling the angels, calling the angels. I invite you to close your eyes. Whatever scripture you may turn to, whatever ancient tales, there are stories of angels among us. And there's so much about it that we don't understand, and there's so much about it that has been exaggerated that it's easy to dismiss. But today, this message comes to us very intentionally. Because if we are to create heaven on earth, as it is in heaven, so shall it be on earth, then do we not need the support of heaven? Do we not need to understand ourselves as a being that is here for a purpose that is so much greater than we may have yet imagined? And can we open our mind to the possibility that if we begin to ask, perhaps there's guidance and help. Perhaps there's support. It's not magic. It's simply hearing what you need to hear in order to take your next step. It's being guided at the right time to the right place for the just right encounter that results in what looks like a miracle. And yet it was right timing because you ask. Can we open our hearts and realize that there's still more room to love? Can we open our mind and our perception and realize that there's still so much more yet to be perceived? And can we make ourselves more available and make commitments that are even more worthy or call us even higher? Because when we do, we will call forth a level of support that may not have yet even been activated. Help me to see beyond the surface. Help me to spend time in prayer and meditation in the solace of my own being, that I may come to discover the infinity of my being and the vast connectedness in which I live and move and am animated. May I come to know that I can be the one that can hear the word that needs to be shared to the one in front of me. May I come to know that I can be guided to the opportunities that will allow me to further develop who I am here to be. and will help assist me in being a light, a support for others. We open our heart, we call upon heaven and earth, all that we are made of, and all that we are held within. We call upon it for our own healing and revealing, for greater joy and purpose, for deeper harmony, for living in relationship to all our relations, those that we can see and those that we cannot. And to be one who truly is in this world, but we realize we're not of it. And so we bring that awareness into every act, every thought, every dilemma, into every crack and crevice of our heart and our mind. And we repeat as necessary, going back, take me deeper, make me stronger, open my eyes that I may see. Calling the angels, calling the angels, calling the angels, calling the angels. At my right hand, at my right hand, Michael, at my left hand, Gabriel, before me, Uriel, behind me, Raphael, at my right hand, Michael, at my left hand, Gabriel, before me, Uriel, behind me, Raphael, calling the angels, calling the angels. So I invite you to open your eyes and to wiggle your hands and toes and bring back a smile. Bring back a smile that says, oh, I'm trying, or oh, I'm doing. Stand, if you will, with us. Here we go. At my right hand, at my left hand, Gabriel, before me, Uriel, behind me, Raphael, right at my right hand, Michael, at my left hand, Gabriel, before me, Uriel.